Okay, can everybody hear me? Thumbs up. Guys, good. Okay. Yeah, so when I was asked to do this, thank you, Lorelai, for asking me. It's always really good to be of service. I didn't think I was going to be nervous on a Zoom call, but I am, and I am every time I share my story. I've shared my story a few times now. I got 2 years on November 3rd, which is actually the day after my belly button birthday. So it's my belly button birthday and then my sober date. Um, Obviously, I had too much on my birthday. So I guess it all kind of started, in my teenage years. I wish I could blame it on like some kind of childhood trauma, but it was just me. I found out when I was 16 that I had a mental disorder called borderline personality disorder. And I like to mention that because a lot of people have dual diagnoses, and I feel like that goes unnoticed. And addiction was definitely something I was already prone to. And so I was depressed for a very long time in my life. I can barely remember any point that I wasn't. I had a good family. They were very loving, but, I was a very hard child to handle. Um, I was always rebellious, and they would tell me that, to the point where, my mom tried to get me diagnosed with something to find out why I was so rebellious. And that really just carried on into my teens. Um, let's see, when I was 15, it's between 14, 15, or 16. Obviously, I've done enough to forget when exactly it started. But between that age is when I started drinking, and I lived with my grandparents because my relationship with my mother was very strained. So I chose to live with them. And my father had left when I was little, so I didn't have him. I had my stepfather, my mother, and my brother and sister, and I lived with my grandparents. That was when I moved to Statesboro. I was raised in Florida for the first 10 years of my life. That's why I don't sound like I'm from rural Georgia. I never picked that accent up. I really chose not to. So moving here, I experienced a lot of depression. I was bullied a lot in school. I was very unhappy. I didn't really have friends. And I started like kind of secluding and isolating myself from people. And I started sneaking into my grandfather's liquor cabinet, and I would take his liquor. I would sit just on the computer doing whatever, like just be by myself drinking every night. That's what I looked forward to. And it was to the point where I'd have to take those empty liquor bottles, put them behind the rest of the liquor bottles. And then when I finished the liquor bottles in the front, I had to like refill them with tea or water or whatever. And I was terrible. I would steal the car to go get drugs, or have friends over who had drugs. Like, drugs are a part of my story as well. If anybody doesn't like that, they say talk to your sponsor. I usually do, but that was a very big part. But it all started with alcohol. And so it definitely progressed through my teenagehood. I remember one instance. I was at this fundraiser we have here in Statesboro called Relay for Life. And I met up with a couple of, girls that were a little bit older than me. One I actually later found in recovery. She was the one who gave me a water bottle full of vodka to walk around this fundraiser for cancer with. So, obviously I didn't really care about anything other than drinking. That was just, to have fun. And eventually I was in Christian school. I went through that, raised in the church. I knew religion that my parents had taught me about, and eventually found my way away from it, from what I saw in the church, how I was treated for being a little bit different. And that definitely drove my depression and my need to kind of be what other people wanted me to be. And I went into public school after leaving Christian school. And, um, you know, the football game was just so that I could get drunk with my friends, so I could smoke some weed. I started taking like, I guess kind of like cough syrup during school, robo tripping during high school. I don't remember any of high school. Um, I ended up getting kicked out, pregnant. I have an 8-year-old, so I got pregnant at 16 years old. And that is when I stopped. I stopped doing everything for a while, and to be able to take care of him. And that was also a very traumatic experience. I was 16 when I got pregnant. His father, not the best. 17, was told at his weight check that I had to have an emergency C-section. For a 17-year-old, that was a very traumatic experience to go through. He was born with a disorder, so he had to be taken to a city with a better hospital. I was without him, had to go stay there for a couple of weeks with him in NICU. So we finally bring him home, and I was with him for until he was 2 years old. And a lot of things had happened with his father that really messed up my mental health even further than it was already disrupted. And I left I left Statesboro, and I moved to Savannah, which is 45 minutes away from here. And that I left everything here behind, pretty much just slept on people's couches in their spare rooms. I had a job, and I tried to pay rent at one point, but that lasted only a few months, because every night I would just drink after work. I was 18. I could get into any bar, because of where I worked and who I worked with. I could get into all of the bars. I'm a cute girl, so free shots. Um, there were times I'd go out in the alley of my job and smoke a cigarette, and somebody random would walk up to me and offer me some Coke and some Jack, not the soda Coke. But I would, no hesitation, I would take it. No hesitation. I don't care what it is. As long as it did something. And that was the confidence I had in alcohol and in drugs, that it was going to do something to me. And I didn't really care what it was, as long as it was something other than what I was feeling at that time. And, I was a very reckless person when I lived there. And I had a roommate at one point who even sold a bunch of stuff so I could get whatever I wanted in the room right next door to me. And, that it wasn't bad in the way that I had no consequences. At that time, I was really just on my own. I would drink after work. I would sneak drinks during work. I would go to sleep and wake up next to a half empty beer can and a dead blunt from the night before, and I would just chug the beer and smoke the blunt, and then drink some more and go straight to work. That was my routine. After work, I'd go drink, and it was a cycle. It was every single night, every single day. That's all I would do. That's what my life revolved around. It had really no meaning. I was involved a lot there's a music scene there, a lot of bands and, creative stuff. I was involved with that, but also what went with that was you were always drinking, or doing other things. And so moving forward, I lived with this one girl who ended up relapsing on heroin because we had a very close friend. Her boyfriend and a close friend of mine ended up killing himself. Um, and we were both there when we found him. And I talk about this part because, when I started my steps, that was something that I had never let myself feel that, because after that, it was off to the races for me. There was not a day, not a time that I was sober at all. I was just sober enough to be able to take care of his girlfriend, my roommate, my friend, who was on heroin at the time. And I stayed in Savannah until she moved and I moved, just because I wanted to make sure she didn't die in that period of time. So I moved back to Statesboro to be with my kid again, but I still was living with my family. I was working overnight shifts and taking Adderall to get through it, taking Vyvanse to get through it, drinking afterwards. And it was a bunch of up and down just constantly. And that's what my life revolved around for a long time. Eventually I got 2 DUIs. Those were my consequences. Some of those were my legal consequences and financial. I got my DUIs. One was a misdemeanor, another was a felony, due to the paraphernalia that they had found in my car that I kept with me. And, later on, I got to watch the videotapes of my DUIs. And it was the point the attorney told me that she didn't think that that was me in the video when I had walked in. I was so drunk that I was unrecognizable in the video versus me in person. And I try to remember that anytime I have thoughts about going back out. But it got to the point I got fired from my job for being high. Ended up going to a new job with fantastic people, fantastic job. I'm in the service industry, and a lot of stuff that goes on in there is drinking and is stimulants, is drugs. It all goes hand in hand. And that's what we would do every single night after work. We would go drink and we would do drugs, and that was it. Every night, what are we doing? So that was kind of what really, really took off. Because I was surrounded by people who were getting just as messed up as I was. So I didn't have to feel bad about what I was doing. And that led to a very bad situation. Like, I didn't have a car because of my legal consequences and my DUIs, and I'd have to make up a lie to get my grandparents, who were my transportation, to pick me up from the bar at 3 o'clock in the morning. Who does that to their grandparents? I had failed a drug test for cocaine, knowing that I had a drug test in 3 days, still did cocaine, thinking it would be gone in 3 days. It wasn't. My probation officer told me he would take away my child. He would take away my freedom if I didn't stop doing what I was doing. And I didn't stop doing what I was doing. That was not enough of a consequence for me. What was enough was the night of my birthday. I was working and I was taking shots on the job. My manager found out, and later he fired me, but I got uh, invited to a party, basically coerced me there because there was that nice white stuff I mentioned before. I did way too much, started hallucinating, talking to a dog, thinking my probation officer was going to bust in and SWAT team and everything. I don't remember falling asleep. Pretty sure I saw God. And that night was the night that I figured out I was going to die if I kept doing this, that I was that close. I was going to die. And I thought for a long time that I wanted that. I really did. I realized through my recovery that I was trying to kill myself for a while. And then I found out I wanted to live for myself. I wanted to live for my son and my family. And so I had found AA previously through my consequences saying I had to come to meetings. And it went from me sitting in that room hating everything and thinking I shouldn't be there to knowing that that was exactly where I needed to be to survive. And that's when I surrendered completely. Everything I surrendered to the program. I changed everything. I had lost my job, so I wasn't in that environment anymore. I left my friends to the point where they thought I was dead and I was still in the same town, relied on only people in AA. I started working the steps with a sponsor and one by one let go of those resentments. I found a higher power. I let go of my defects and I continued to work on them. Um, it's been a long road. In the last 2 years, I remember being 30 days. I wanted to start crying when people were saying, they were less than 90 days, 60 days, 30, because I remember it. It sucked. But God, it got so much better. And all those promises we read have come true. In 6 months, I got my license back. I moved out of my family's, got a place of my own. I had a good job at the time. I was self-sufficient. I was taking care of myself. I had a relationship with my kid and my family. I wasn't carrying so much around with me anymore. And I had that serenity we talk about. And, those are some of that's just like material things, but like the peace that I have inside of myself and the awareness, um, and the ability to be able to handle life on life's terms, that has really been a turning point because I've had a lot of things happen in the last 2 years that I've had to apply all of these steps to. And I'm never going to be done working the steps. Um, it's I always like to end with it gets a lot better if you keep doing what the program says and just give it all up to it and have somebody that you trust and give all that stuff up and really want it for yourself, not anybody else, but for yourself, then you have a chance to be able to do this. It's a simple program. It can be very hard sometimes, and it will be, but it is so much worth it today. My life is great. I'm in school again. I never thought I'd be in school again. It's been 5 years. I have a path. I have a good job. I have a relationship with my family that I never thought that I would have. And I have friends and people that care about me and I can call at any time. I got so much more from this program than just not drinking. So I'm really grateful to be here. I know that was longer than 15 minutes. It's hard to fit all that in, but thank you for letting me share my story.